And the rest of this cable is pretty much the casing that it lives in. So keep in mind when you're walking around, try to avoid stepping on this cable or twisting it, or especially this part here. Try to avoid any tension on that to jam it, because it's a very sensitive piece. And repairing fiber is very expensive. So that's something to keep in mind. The next thing, if you remember, the other cable was very thick. It was called multi-core. It was a 24-pin cable, and that was sending all the information, 24 pins, to the CCUs, which are the camera control units, and that's how you were able to control the iris, the white balance, the blacks. In this case, we only have the fiber cable, but we're able to do a couple new things with this cable and how it's engineered. One of the big advancements is going to be the intercom. So this is what I was talking about. We're not at 100% yet, but when we do have this hooked up, you're going to be able to plug in just the intercom headset directly into the camera, as opposed to running the belt packs. For right now, and until we get the new headsets, we're still running the same system that we have, which is from the I/O panel over here and daisy chained to the cameras. But that is kind of a nice feature.
When do you expect that?
We're waiting on our engineer to. He's going to test it out to make sure that it actually works, and then we're going to order the new headsets at that point. So what's nice about that is we're going to have this system, but we're also going to keep the old system as a backup. Or if you prefer to run daisy chained to the I/O panel, you can do that. The nice thing about this viewfinder here, it's very similar to the old one, black and white, has the same controls, brightness, contrast, but this is how, it's like your shoulder socket, so this is how you move it around, and you get it affixed to the place where you want, and it's just one lock right here that locks it in place. That's kind of nice as far as ergonomically, it's pretty nice. Then the other controls, you can notice they are different, but they look pretty identical to the old controls. You have your focus here, your zoom control. The nice thing about the zoom control is you have a speed. Now we have a speed control. So slow is S and fast is F.
You guys didn't have that before?
No.
Oh, okay.
Just,
You had to do it manually.
just on the ones in the van.
You still have, well, you still have, to that, you still have control, if you look here, at depending on how much you touch, but then you also have an added speed control. And this, at a certain point, gets to a constant speed, and it just stays at that constant speed. And you have a variable speed with the light touch on it. So next we have, the next big thing is that, particularly on this camera, is what you're going to be doing. Instead of running the teleprompter cable, you could actually run it out of the camera into the teleprompter here. So you run it from the other side of the camera into the teleprompter, and it's engineered through the fiber cable to pick up the feed from the teleprompter, which is very nice. So we're going to eventually cut a BNC that fits kind of directly, so we can just leave it in place at all times. That way we're not having to, you still have to run power. This is the same system, so you still have to run power to this guy, but it's one less cable to run. Any questions on that? Next we have, we're actually, just want to let you know, we're in the process of repairing one of the pedestals. It's out right now. I'm going to start from the bottom and just work my way up. What you notice here at the inputs, we no longer have the wireless mics in the control room. They were actually illegal. They could have been dinged by the FCC. We were not, but they were just so old. They were about 10 years old, and the frequencies, it was illegal to broadcast those frequencies. No harm done, but we took those out, and we opened up 4 more inputs on the Snake. So mic 1 through mic 8 is input 1 to input 8 on the mixer, on the audio mixer in the control room. So what that means basically is that all of the inputs are open now, as opposed to only 4 when we had the 4 wireless mics.
So we have no wireless mics now?
No, we don't. Next we have the intercom. So the intercom is the identical. You plug in, you can plug into any one, you can daisy chain from one input, and you're probably going to end up using this if you have a floor manager, because the floor manager cannot plug directly into the camera. So we're still going to end up using this, or at least as a backup. We have our, I'm not going to talk about every port on here. If you have specific questions, you can talk to me later. This is our program out, so if you were to, say, record to a separate audio recorder, if you had a Zoom H4n or something like that you wanted to take and record separately from whatever's happening inside. I use this a lot for if you're doing any behind-the-scenes work and you have a separate camera and you wanted to take a program feed into a field camera, and you'd be able to shoot behind the scenes but also get the audio feed from the studio show itself. Then we also have a Ethernet cable. This is just live internet. So if you're doing something talent that has to have the internet, like Skype or something like that, this would be just a solid internet connection as opposed to the wireless that may or may not be solid. Next, this is my favorite part that is still being tweaked with, and it's not online yet, but that's a laptop input. So once it's up and running, you will be able to plug in a laptop, and it goes through what's called a scaler, and it makes it and up-reses it to be an input on the switcher. So that meaning you could either have a news program where they're talking about a news story in the New York Times, and you can bring up NewYorkTimes.com news article, bring it into your program.
So if you were interviewing somebody on Skype, you could actually put them on?
You could definitely put them on. The problem also becomes you have to do some re-engineering, because getting the sync of back and forth, it's not plug and play. You can't necessarily do Skype right away, but you could do YouTube videos, you could do all kinds of other things, particularly if you have anchors or talent that's on, and you could plug into their laptop and they can say, let me show you something I have on my laptop, and bring it into the program. So it's very nice, especially given that our play deck or our source deck has to be ProRes, has to be HD quality. This, you can take anything. You can take JPEGs, you can take a DVD, standard definition, play it off a laptop. Whatever you can play off a laptop, you can play into the program, which is nice. Next we have, up here, we have HD program. This is an SDI. SDI, there's two kind of types of HD cables. One is an HDMI, which you're probably familiar with cameras, and a lot of TVs have HDMI. Not a lot of TVs have SDI. SDI is more of a professional grade. The reason for it is mainly because HDMI have a certain length, and then the signal starts to die out. So about 15 to 20 feet, and then you don't really get your HD signal the whole way, and you need boosters and different things like that to make it work. But SDI, you can have longer runs. You can have 50, 100 feet runs, and so that's why we end up using it for all of the wiring in the control room to our patch room and to here as well. So any HD input looks identical to a BNC, and there's actually no way to know unless you know that it's an SDI. So the SD program is going to be a BNC cable. So you plug in a BNC cable here. If you plugged in a BNC cable to HD program, you're not going to get anything. It's just not going to send anything. Next we have two switcher inputs, and these are both SDI and HD signals. So you could hypothetically add two cameras to the mix. So if you had a camera on a crane or something like that, you can add it in and bring it up in the switcher. The big thing to know about that is it has to be either SDI camera, which is usually a higher end camera, something around $4,000 or above. So you want to check that to make sure that you're bringing a camera here that has an SDI out, or else you won't be able to bring it in the switcher. or if you have an adapter, there's these little boxes, which I'll show you in a second, that convert an SDI to an HDMI. So you can take HDMI out of your camera and convert it to SDI. The little box adapter is actually like $700. They're very expensive.
So what about a field camera? Can you bring a field camera in here now?
Here, actually, we've cut.
Just that, yeah.
Right. So the old, SD equipment took up a lot of space. Decks are big, So these are now our decks as opposed to the big decks that we used to have. On top of that, we've moved a lot of the switcher racks and the CCUs themselves into Edit B. So there's a one rack of and there's actually a lot of space left on it, of all of the stuff that are in here. So everything is running from the I/O panel into Edit B and then back through there's different ports on the back of here that run into the equipment. One thing before kind of finish out a wired remote control to the CCUs that live in Edit B. And the main things that you're going to do are the things that we did on the old CCUs, which is we bring up camera 2, obviously we have a problem. That's because the iris is wide open. So as I tweak that, I'm going to be able, now I'm at somewhere around 8 or 9.4. And then we also have our blacks.
Is that the f-stop?
That's the iris, yeah. Iris setting, and then we also have our blacks, so I can crush the blacks or find a decent place for the blacks to live. Obviously, you want to check this because this is something that may have worked for somebody in the last shoot, but there's no right or wrong answer on these controls. You have to tweak it for what you need and what you're shooting. For the most part, you got to watch that it's not completely washed out or completely too black where you're not seeing the details anymore and you're losing your image. So those are the two controls that we have. The other thing about this, which is very nice, as you can see, is the scopes. So we have different scopes and we have different layouts of the scopes, and those are controlled here. So you can change the scope itself by hitting F4, and then you can change the layout. So say you want to get to, this is the waveform monitor right here, and so you can change the layout to see things bigger, or you want to see more of the image as opposed to the scopes. That's how you do that, by hitting. Need some water. The program